Hello everybody, the Chess Edge is back with a new series of videos. The game begins at about the 1 minute and 23 second mark, but hear me out so you know what this new series is about. Instead of always looking at Grandmaster games, it can sometimes be more valuable to look at games played at your current rating level to see the typical mistakes made at that playing strength. With that in mind, I created new accounts at chess.com and at Lichess so I could start at 1200 level rating points, which is D level. I then worked my way up to expert level, which is 2000 rating points. I will be creating 4 videos at each of the different rating levels so we can see typical errors to avoid at each level from D to A level, which I'll be releasing in the next few weeks. So hit the subscribe button and bell icon so you can be notified when the videos are uploaded. I will try to make the videos as instructive as possible, so we'll include other tips as we go through the games. I will place links in the description below to other videos which cover some of the themes I mentioned. Without further ado, let's look at games played in the 1200 to 1400 rating range. Remember, you are only as good as the questions you ask yourself before you make your move. Okay, I have the black pieces here and my opponent plays d4 and I play d5. Remember, the opening is about controlling center space so that your pieces have more activity and mobility than your opponent's, but it's very difficult to achieve because both sides are trying to do that. It's also about each side trying to create strategic imbalances of known strategic themes that they can try to capitalize on throughout the game. Okay, he challenges my d-pawn with his less valuable c-pawn. I defend with e6, knight to c3, knight to f6, knight to f3, and c5. So I'm attacking his more valuable d-pawn with my c-pawn. Okay, he plays a3, probably to prevent, he's going to chase my bishop away after he captures and gains some queenside space. All right, that's his idea. So I take instead, don't give him that option. He recaptures with the knight. I hit the knight. He defends. And I castle. So far, so good for both sides. Bishop to e2, and then I take. Okay, these are 10-minute games, and I take with tempo. I'm giving up my bishop. I don't know, probably not the best idea, but I'm going to attack his queen if he takes with the queen. If he takes with the pawn, I get an isolated d-pawn. So then I have a strategic theme to work with, which I cover in the exclusive content, by the way. The middle game, the exclusive content is all about the middle game. Okay, enough of a sales pitch. Bishop takes, and he takes with the pawn. So now I have the isolated d-pawn. Got something to work with. I develop and attack the d-pawn. Now I have a threat. As soon as I move the knight. So remember, look, the first question: what is the threat? Is there a threat? Is it a forcing move? I'm threatening to win the d-pawn, right? I'm threatening to win this pawn here. I've got 2 attackers on him. My queen is x-raying it. So white didn't ask that question. Yeah, that's the main question you need to ask of the 28 or 30 questions that I have. That when you add the power moves up, 6 times 4 is 24 from the black and the white side. Okay, so he doesn't ask that, and he pins my knight. I take, he takes back with the bishop, and now I win a pawn, and I just go for it, and I go for the endgame with a pawn up, and then all else being equal, unless he has an attack where he can win the pawn back quickly, I'll be able to defend his threats, just theoretically. So he takes, and I take, and he remaneuvers his bishop. To prevent, now I see why, to prevent this check, but he could have castled as well. And now I'm x-raying the undefended bishop. He should look at that threat as well. Whenever you maneuver around the board, you have to see if you're giving your opponent a power move. Undefended pieces is power move number 3. Yeah. So, and you have to look at the x-rays. Every time your opponent moves, there's a potential threat there. He doesn't look at that either. Okay, so he wants to give me the doubled pawns, which is okay because I'm up a pawn, which is a bigger advantage. All else being equal, unless he can go for it and get it. But, you know, he's going to be too slow at that because my pieces are active. He castles, and then again, he had to look at what is the threat. He actually needed to move his king out of check, or move his bishop. Yeah, he should have moved his bishop. Because here, bang, check with the knight. His bishop's exposed. He takes back with the pawn. I rupture his pawn structure. Remember, time, space, force, and pawn structure are the 4 key elements of chess. Everything revolves around that. And now I take the bishop, threatening an undefended pawn. I have the initiative. And it really is a matter of technique now. Game is over, right? I'm up a pawn. And I have a bishop against a knight. Another strategic theme. Pawns on both sides of the board favors the bishop. So your technique has to get up to par. He defends. I'll just show you the rest of the game for the sake of it. But the takeaway really is looking at the threats. I created the isolated D pawn, right? Strategic theme. I won it, and he didn't look at the future threats. I mean, he could have hung in there for a while and have more resistance. So he maneuvers the knight, attacking the pawn. I defend it. Like I said, you know, I'll be able to defend all the threats because he doesn't have the initiative. He doesn't have the tempo gainers. Rook takes. I develop my bishop. And knight attacks the pawn and the bishop. I really don't care. So anyway, he's drifting now, you know. He should have probably just popped the bishop. But I'll just show you the rest. I take the open file. He remaneuvers. I push him away. And I want to get the 7th rank, right? That's one of the strategic goals. Go after the pawns on the 7th. X-rays the king. Okay, all of these, and I'm attacking them. I want to get rid of the defender, right? Simple chess, right? Get rid of the defender, win the pawn here. Bang, bang. Game over soon enough. Go after the other pawn. He's giving me everything, but that's the way it is. All right. So this is all pretty self-explanatory. Mopping up the pawns is the key in the endgame with the rooks. All right, so I've told you about the takeaways here. And there it is. Let's move on to the next game. Okay, so my opponent opens with e4. I play c5, knight to f3, e6, bishop to e2. I think this is a little passive. These are 10-minute games. Knight to c6, castles. Queen to c7. I'm protecting the e5 square another time so I can bring my knight out without worrying about this pawn chasing it away. I'll have 2 defenders on that square, and he has only 1 attacker on it. He plays d3, which really blocks that light-squared bishop. Way too passive. Knight to f6. c3. Again, a pawn move at the expense of developing your pieces. It's usually a no-no unless you know what you're doing, but I don't know my openings, so I always like to play with principles, get my pieces out, and castle. Bishop to e7, and the bishop x-rays. This bishop attacks the knight. The bishop is in an attack posture. It can always choose when to capture. It's more powerful as an attacker. So I'm worrying about this already. If he can somehow get this knight out of here after I castle and get this knight out, then this bishop will be undefended. Just the quick things that go through my mind. Castle, knight to d2, b6, so I can get my bishop out, my light squared bishop. So far so good by the 1200 something rated player. Knight to c4, and that move, remember, every time your opponent makes a move, you have to ask, what is the threat? Is there a threat? A threat is to win material, to gain space, time, or force, or to rupture your pawn structure. When that knight came to c4, he's now hitting the e5 square 2 times, which means he can enter that square with a pawn and chase my knight away. So I defended that square with d6. Now I have 3 defenders on that square. He cannot enter it. Rook slides over to c1, x-raying my queen. Always look at the x-rays. As soon as these pawns get out of the way, my queen will be vulnerable. Bishop to b7, developing, uniting the rooks. Queen to c2. Now he has 2 attackers on my queen. Now I'm chasing the knight away. This is power move number 5. Little guys harassing big guys. That's part of my 6th power move system. I'll put a link in that somewhere, either below or at the end of this video above. Chase the knight out. Knight to e3. So far so good. There really isn't anything for me to attack. So I'm just developing, trying to gain space. Most chess games are won with a spatial advantage at the higher levels. And then you convert one of those elements, time, space, force, or pawn structure, to maybe another element, to eventually to a force advantage where you can finally launch a tactic that works, that is unstoppable. I support that undefended pawn with a6. He plays a3. Maybe he wants to push here. I don't know, but I have to look at that. It's not a threat per se. Rook to c8. I'm not really defending the queen. I'm just getting on this file that might be opened. I really want to get my queen out of there if I need to, as soon as things start to get a little dicey. Now queen to d2. Now he's placed the rook in front of my queen. And I play rook over, x-raying his queen. And he plays. Okay, every time your opponent moves, you have to ask 2 things. What is the threat? Is it a threat? Is it a forcing move? If it isn't a forcing move, you can look for in-between moves, which I call the Chicago way in my book. And then you look for opportunities, new opportunities that move may have given you. And sure enough, because he didn't ask one of the key questions you need to ask before you make all your moves. And one of those questions is, what is my piece already doing? Every piece on the board is already in an attack or defensive posture. When you move it, it is no longer performing that function. So you need to know what you are giving up when you make your move. He just gave me this pawn and his attack, and I'll be able to attack the queen, and game over. He does resign here. Of course, he's also going to lose this bishop here, which is now attacked 2 times and only defended once, and he won't be able to move the queen and defend the bishop. He could have avoided this error if he had asked these questions before he moved, and it would make it more difficult for me to beat him. That's the key. Become tougher to beat, and your rating automatically goes up. Okay, so stay tuned for the next 2 games at the D level, at the 1200 to 1400 level, by subscribing and thumbs up and hitting that bell button so you know when the videos come out. And then I'll be continuing on later with the C level play and B level and how to beat A players too. Or rather, the mistakes that players make at each of those levels that allow higher rated players to beat them.